Wine and Crime contains graphic and explicit content which may not be suitable for some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
You are listening to Wine and Crime, the podcast where three friends chug wine, chat true crime, and unleash their worst Minnesotan accents.
Oh, yeah. You know it.
Yeah, sure. No betcha.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'd fuck me.
Oh. We have a very... Oh, fuck. I'm Kenyan.
We have a very... Lucy.
Fuck.
Yeah, fuck.
I'm Amanda.
We're consistent.
We
I'll
are.
give us that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have a very special fan pick this week brought to you by fan picker Endelion Hopkins.
Ooh.
What a cool name.
Endelion.
Endelion.
I don't know.
Endelion?
Endelion.
And I lion?
Am I lying? Did you include a pronunciation guide? I don't think you did.
That's okay.
And they have selected the topic of weird torture,
Ugh.
which was exceedingly fun to research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and specifically asked for one of us to include tickle torture, and the winner was me.
Oh,
drew
I
that
didn't know
short
that
end.
was the fan pick. Well, I must have at some point known that, but I forgot.
Well, they didn't choose a specific case. They just said to include tickle torture, and so my case is really sad.
Well, mine does not involve tickling, and we'll have to decide at the end which we think is worse.
Oh, God.
Okay.
It's pretty rough.
Great.
My segment is quite rough, too.
There
so
are-
blanket trigger warning to
Turns out-
anybody.
Lots of ways that humans have invented to torture one another,
Yeah.
and we can be very creative.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
But before we get to our wine crime pairing, we have a little butt plug / life update.
Oh, tell us more. I
And-
can't
no
imagine
idea.
what you could possibly be saying.
And I thought it was apropos of weird torture.
Because of how you've been handling
Because
this?
of how I've been feeling and complaining to
How
these
the
two.
group chat's been feeling.
You know, I don't like to suffer in silence.
No. Misery loves company, baby.
As of this recording, which is like mid-May, I am about 17 weeks pregnant.
She is swollen with child.
She's fallen pregnant.
I have fallen pregnant. All it took was tens of thousands of dollars in IVF treatments.
Who knew?
And months of being really uncomfortable in my own skin.
Get used to it.
Uh-huh.
It's not gonna get better from here.
Yeah. You have to really want to be a parent to go through this.
My favorite text so far from Kenyon has been, please remind me if I ever want to get pregnant a second time to not do it.
No, I'm not allowed. I'm not allowed.
You have to put it in writing this time because
Yeah.
you've said similar things that you have henceforth gone through with.
I can never do this again. I'm so happy. And everyone who's been on a fertility journey like I have been will understand. Like I feel very lucky and privileged that I've gotten pregnant, and so far so good with this one after multiple miscarriages. But 0 out of 10 would not recommend pregnancy to anyone else. I hate it. It's horrible. I am hopefully gonna love my kid.
Fingers
Hopefully.
crossed.
But it's just terrible. And that is why every time I brush my teeth, I throw up. like violently puke. I have pissed and shat myself while puking multiple times
Up a brick wall.
on a brick wall, which is really impossible to clean.
She's a squirter.
Like an uncoated brick wall.
You guys, I can't.
It's very real. And so it also behooves me to go on a mini rant about our fucking Supreme Court and how they are going to inflict.
Yeah, you wanted this and you wouldn't put this on your worst enemy.
I really would. The fact that they are going to force people to remain pregnant and give birth is the craziest form of weird torture one could possibly imagine. And I know that we'll talk about it more and rant about it more in future episodes. But
we're very concerned about that low birth count for white babies.
Oh, yeah. Gotta increase the domestic supply of infants.
As we have no supply of baby formula.
But also, if we're following the rational trajectory of this sort of legislation, then I'm sure we're going to lower the age of which it's allowable to adopt a child, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
Totally.
Oh, yeah. And open adoptions to
LGBTQ
plus
people,
queer families.
People of different religions.
Trans people.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah.
There are even restrictions
just logical.
against people with certain disabilities adopting. It is fucked up. And the foster system is fucked. We could go on forever.
But
and I'm
we
sure
won't.
we will at some point.
Congratulations on your pregnancy.
Thank you. I am happy, but I would not wish this on anyone unless they really, really wanted it. Because it is fucked up. And also, I've been faking drinking this whole time, so don't be concerned for me. So I have not been drinking alcohol at all for
She's
4 months.
only been doing fentanyl, so it's super fine for the baby. Yeah.
Any hoozle, we've got
a rum and coke.
It was not a rum and coke. It was
Spicy
just a coke. Because that is all I could hold down without puking for 3 months.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anywho.
so doing great. Baby is due in October.
Woohoo!
And I wish everybody else out there who's dealing with infertility all the best. And it's not easy. And baby dust.
Can I ask one favor of you?
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Come October, when you are plentiful,
Live stream it.
please
Swole.
don't paint your belly as a jack-o'-lantern.
Why would you? You and
Because
Zach
people
both
do
have come
that.
up with the most bizarre.
No, people do that. It's not my idea.
I am not
don't
with child
do
and I
that.
want to do that.
I am not those people.
I'm doing
I could
it.
do that, yeah.
I'm doing
At least
it.
with my big boob.
I got you. I'll do it. We're
I'll do
good.
it on my ass.
Yeah,
Great.
nice.
Listen, I'm ready.
I will not be doing anything in October besides pushing out a baby and complaining about it a lot.
Yeah. I'll be
Gonna
muting the chat.
Mute my chat.
Yeah. Skim.
Skim. Amanda's having a crisis. Kenny is pregnant. Skim.
Did we say what the topic was?
Yes,
Weird torture. Like being
pregnancy.
I know that you referenced it, but I didn't know if we
No, she said
announced
it. She said it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a form of weird torture. You're just nauseous 100% of the time.
Oh, yes.
Anyway,
Oh, yes.
it's
Your
fine.
body is a wonderland.
Whatever. Let's get to the wine crime pairing. I'm drinking water.
I have wine,
I-
actually.
Good for you. So when our fan picker requested Franzia Chillable Red, I thought to myself, wow.
You like
really-
a chilled red, though.
I do, but like
That is a
Franzia.
weird torture.
Yeah, I thought, wow, you really want to see me suffer. You're inflicting the torture.
Yes,
And
yes.
then I thought to myself, I can make a summer cocktail with this and be in slightly less pain.
Yep.
So I have concocted a little summer sipper using the Franzia Chillable Red, which is a lighter-bodied red wine that is meant to be served chilled and can be great in like wine cocktails and sangrias. So I did sort of a twist on a sangria It is the Franzia Chillable Red with blood orange. I juiced it and then I sliced it to add to my cocktail. I also used a splash of rhubarb shrub, which I will talk about.
I love a shrub.
Me too. A splash of Grand Marnier and a little bit of just like a dash of lemonade. And if you're wondering what a shrub is, quote, a shrub is basically an old way of preserving. It's typically a fruit-infused syrup made with fresh ingredients, then fortified with vinegar or alcohol. Then it's aged, and that develops the flavor and the complexity. So this shrub is rhubarb with apple cider vinegar and sugar. I make them like not all the time, but I have made, you can make rosemary shrub is really, really good in like gin and tonics with Saint Germain. And like you can just kind of peruse what you have. I have some strawberries, hopefully that will fruit this year in one of the pots in my backyard. I want to make a strawberry shrub at the end of the summer. So
it's like a tart.
Yeah.
It's like a tart bitters almost, right?
Yeah, it's sort of like bitters, but it's more like ferment. It's almost like kombucha the way that I make it because I'm doing it with vinegar. So I like mine with apple cider vinegar, but you can do it. You can make a shrub in just like vodka,
You
like
have
high-proof
such
vodka.
like hidden Martha Stewart activities.
Listen, I
You
like to
super
garden
do.
and I like to make a shrub and I'm going to get into macrame. So my life is going really great.
Oh my God, macrame.
Mm-hmm.
Look what I started yesterday.
And it's actually, this is really good. I could drink
Very
this
cute.
all summer long, and I can because I have a fucking box of Franzia in my goddamn fridge now.
And an IUD.
And if you're thinking about trying to make a shrub, they're super duper easy. Like,
They're
don't
so
be
easy,
afraid.
and
just
there's a
because you're not
million
familiar with the
recipes.
term.
Yeah, it's so easy. It's literally just put stuff in a jar, cover it, and let it sit. But
Yeah.
you can just Google like any flavor, herb, whatever that you think would be fun. Google that word and shrub, and a million recipes for it will pop up. It's so easy.
I have never even heard of this thing.
I'm
But
sure
very
that you've
cool.
had cocktails that use a shrub because it's really, really popular at like, you know,
Fancy.
craft cocktail bars and shit like that. And they can upcharge you for that kind of shit, but it costs like nothing to make your own.
When we were in Philadelphia at that really fun rooftop bar, I had I guess it was a beer, but it was like a rhubarb shrubby beer. And it was really fucking good.
Yeah, I mean, shrub is somewhat fermented, so it totally works.
It's like a sour.
Cool. Well,
Cheers.
things fermenting and like weird sugar will come into play in my case.
Great.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, cheers, people.
Cheers.
Cheers to
Oh,
Kenyon's
cheers.
unborn baby.
To the unborn.
Woo!
I'm drinking for two.
But only one legal entity with rights.
Right.
Yes.
And it's the baby, not you.
Yeah.
It's not you.
According to our Supreme Court in like 1 month. Yeah. It's
It's not
the
you.
parasite living within me.
Oh no. Oh no. It's the clump of cells with a faint electrical
Signal.
pulsing in it.
Yeah. Flicker.
Ugh.
When there is not even a heart to have chambers that could beat. It's fine. It's fine.
Everything's fine. The miracle of motherhood. Okay.
God bless.
All right.
Is it my
sorry.
turn?
Yeah, your turn. Again, you go now. Lucy, what's our background in psych for weird torture?
Fucking you go now.
Fucking, I don't
All
care.
right, your turn. Popcorn Lucy.
Oh my God. Okay. This is from Encyclopedia Britannica, the father of my child. Torture is the infliction of severe physical or mental pain or suffering for a purpose such as extracting information, coercing a confession, or inflicting punishment. It is normally committed by a public official or other person exercising comparable power and authority. So it's not bullying. It's like
It's specific.
it has an intent, whether it's eliciting some sort of information or a confession or a punishment. A lot of torture can result in death, but it's not the same as an execution necessarily.
You're probably
So-
going to get to this, but I have a question.
Okay.
So in my case, the word torture, I find this case to have been torture, although it was for like sexual gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Does that fall under that category? If I slightly misunderstood the assignment, whatever. I cover tickling.
No, there's
but-
a lot of
Right.
a lot of overlap.
Okay.
I
okay.
feel like a lot of serial killers inflict
Right.
sexual torture for their own benefit.
Precisely.
But even the person being subjected upon could find some sort of pleasure about
that
it.
is not the case in this.
But I don't know if that would
situation,
count
but
as torture.
torture, 'cause it's
I feel like it would
consensual.
just, exactly.
Well, there are.
Like-
I'll rephrase. There are some methods of torture that are intended to inflict like bad pain onto people that sometimes inflict good pain.
Okay.
So like
okay.
BDSM. There are
Right.
certain forms of BDSM that are pleasurable for the recipient, but then
Sure.
also not, and would elicit a confession of some sort.
Sure. Okay.
okay.
I think, as with everything, it's a spectrum. There's a lot
Right.
of overlap. We'll get to kind of the overlap.
Okay.
But yeah, it's,
So, yeah, I didn't totally
it's a gray
shit the
area.
bed. Okay.
No. We'll get to shitting the bed.
Oh God.
Just
okay.
kidding. We won't.
And also, there are torturers who derive a pleasure from inflicting torture, even though the purpose of that torture might be something else, like eliciting a confession or whatever.
Yeah, but the
1000%.
pleasurer getting, or the torturer getting sadistic pleasure is
Right.
what's happening in my case, for
Right.
sure.
I won't be covering that
Mm-hmm.
because there was so much to talk about that I
Sure.
mostly just focused on the things that I found interesting, as
Yeah,
always.
it's our podcast. We can do what we want to.
can do whatever the
Teratomas,
fuck I
baby.
want.
Yeah. It's our
Very good
podcast. We
reaction.
can cry if we want to.
And do. We frequently cry.
I usually cry after, but
Yeah, I was gonna say we don't
Sometimes
always
during.
cry on air.
Sometimes
but
before.
we cry a lot.
yeah, it feels good.
It's yeah.
Okay, so starting in the 18th century in the West, with societies replacing physical punishments with things like jail sentences and exile and fines, in addition to police forces, torture began to be seen as cruel and unnecessary, although there's been evidence of torture being used as a punitive process or to elicit some sort of information from like
Time immemorial. It has never gone away.
way back. Yeah.
Mhm.
Scotland abolished torture in 1708, and by the beginning of the 19th century, most of Europe had abandoned the practice in a legal sense. And after that, any violence demonstrated against a criminal was deemed a crime in, like, just overall. But obviously, we will get to certain circumstances when it was not.
And also,
Sure.
it's not like conditions generally in the 19th century were that great. So
What?
a lot passed
What do
as
you
not
mean?
torture.
I'm gonna take us through a very extensive list of specific kinds of torture, and most of them do not include types that are employed today by like,
Tickling.
I don't know, the U.S. government,
Right.
or whatever. So
Mhm. Your
most
local
of-
police force.
most of what we're talking about today is like sort of historical means of torture. But how effective is torture actually? Quote, although the effectiveness of torture has been defended by many throughout history, notably Aristotle and Sir Francis Bacon, it was attacked as early as Roman times for encouraging its victims to lie.
Mhm.
So even then, they were just like,
People are just going to say whatever they can to
Yeah.
make the pain stop.
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
It's not that difficult a concept to figure out, and yet we still seem to be struggling with it today. In ancient Greece and Rome, physical torture was lawfully used, usually on non-citizens or slaves, enslaved people, as a means of obtaining information or confessions. Later, in early medieval Europe, torture was used as the trial itself in the ordeal, wherein the suspect's response to extreme physical pain served as the basis for establishing guilt or innocence.
Wow.
Just the most bonkers things you can imagine.
I mean,
And-
this is like, we talk about like the Salem witch trials and like, oh, if she drowns, she's innocent. And if she floats, she's a witch and she's going to be burned anyway. It's like, there's no rationale.
Right. Or like the pricking of the skin. And like, what is it? If they didn't feel it, they were a witch.
If they didn't like flinch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like sometimes they would be so desensitized from like other painful shit they've been through.
Right.
Mhm.
I don't know.
I think
It's all absurd.
I think the point here is to like consider like the Enlightenment period as it was surprising that it didn't diminish like torture as a practice in general
Mhm.
because it was all about like rationale and logic and all that stuff. So I don't know.
It shifted, but it didn't disappear.
It definitely shifted. It shifted away from the witch drowning and all that stuff. But yeah, it was still a practice and is still a practice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in the later Middle Ages, torture was again used to secure confessions in cases of serious crime. Confession was known by the term at this point as the queen of proof or proofs.
Okay.
So
Which
like that
we now know that
So like the
confessions-
highest,
it
form
was
of
held
proof.
as and it often still is in courtrooms today. Like if you confess to it, how could you not have done it?
I think for a while, or in some places and times, like somebody couldn't be prosecuted until they confessed.
Mhm.
And so they would just keep torturing until they got a confession. And that was seen as like doing their job.
Right.
Because otherwise
Oh,
they have
that's
to
nice.
let the person go.
I mean, that's still how it's done.
Mhm.
Fucking in a lot of ways.
We talk about like, how it was in the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and like
Yeah.
way back when we didn't know
And
any better. And then it's
2004.
like,
Yeah. And right now.
post 9/11.
Yeah.
Which we'll
Okay.
kind of get to.
Oh, good.
Well, not really, actually. We pointedly will not get to that because it was too much.
Too dark.
But moving on, a bunch of sick bullshit took place between World War II or during World War II, and that bullshit then galvanized international efforts defining and banning certain kinds of torture. So, quote, the first legal responses were stated in the prohibitions of torture and similar inhuman treatment in the 1948 Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the 1949 Geneva Conventions, particularly in the Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war and the Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war. Because as we'll kind of get to, during war and during like upheaval and unrest, torture by the state is extremely common.
Yep.
And it's often underreported. Like it's scary. Like that's when you have to be mindful of that kind of thing.
Like in the Ukraine right now.
Like right now. Torture was also prohibited by the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which was entered into force in 1976. In all states that were party to that covenant, while regional human rights treaties were adopted in Europe, which happened in 1950, and the Americas in 1969, and Africa in 1981. So ongoing definitions and legislation is needed, though, as different human rights initiatives around the world continue to uncover uses of torture, particularly against political prisoners, and like I said, in circumstances of armed conflict. There's also the complicated issues of jurisdiction and extradition in cases of like worldwide international offenses. It's extremely complicated and convoluted. I know that Kenyon can speak more to this than I can, but this is a very, there's just a lot to be said.
Like, it all depends on if there was like a recognized armed conflict taking place at the time in that
which is an
area,
obstacle in itself.
which isn't always the case, which is why countries will play around with different terms like it's a special operation or it's a war.
It's a conflict.
It's a conflict, but it's not a war, because if the combatants are state actors, like an army belonging to a state, that is different than if the combatants are like terrorist cells or, just like random gangs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So all of it kind of depends on like these legal definitions, and then you get down into which country has signed on to which treaty, and if they are a member of the International Criminal Court, which the U.S. is not. So then whether or not they can extradite people. I mean, it's just all like legal details, and then
It's
also
really
like
fucking complicated.
Really
There's
fucking
no black and white
complicated.
answer.
And so few internationally, like so few perpetrators ever get prosecuted or held to account. It's just like too hard to do it after the fact. The process takes forever. Like in major cases, people have like died of natural causes, like way before a verdict ever came down. It's just a mess.
It's a
Big ol'
fucking
mess.
mess. Yeah. So I guess that's sort of the underlying factor of my technical background
It's horrible,
here.
and like very few people are ever held to account and don't expect justice.
And also, like, all of these issues were, at least in the West, were exacerbated by the September 11th attacks.
Right.
And then we had Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib and all these black sites and all that. And it's just like, I can't. I can't.
And also like I can't remember all the details now, but like, was it the Attorney General for like basically came up with like his own definition of torture,
Lord.
which allowed like waterboarding and like sleep deprivation and like light exposure and like all sound, whatever, like annihilating the eardrums,
We'll
all
get
this
to it.
horrible shit.
But the Bush administration
Like legalized all that because they can
decimated
just
a
say
lot of
whatever
the
they want.
progress. Yeah. The post 9/11 Bush administration, that's its own thing. I absolutely cannot. I can't. I
That would
started
be its
reading
own
about it. I
episode.
can't.
Yeah,
It'd be its own podcast.
right.
Like, it's too much.
But basically, they just, one guy on paper was like, you know what? That's not, waterboarding's not torture. That's enhanced interrogation.
Yeah.
And
It's
so we
fine.
can get away with whatever we want.
Heavy-handedness.
Right. Like zip tying someone and having them like stand, in a corner for days in bright light and like all this horrible shit.
Yep. And like I said, I'm about to go through a whole list, and I do not want to talk about whether or not these specific things are classified as torture under
That's fine.
different, administrations, but
We're not a legal
is.
podcast.
it fucking is. It is torture under humanity. So that said, let's talk about the different flavors of torture.
Oh, God.
So we have talked about some of these in the wrongful executions episode, which was, I believe, 225, which you may remember as like the blood eagle, for example.
A lot of shit I'd never heard of before in that episode.
So lots of methods of execution kind of cross over torture, and a lot of torture results in death, which is technically execution, but it's a gray area.
Yeah, it probably depends on the goal and the purpose. If the goal and the purpose is to like extract information, then once you have the information you think you want, then if death occurs, you might not care. Versus you might actually care and not want that person to die and to keep them alive for as long as possible.
Well, also, like, especially if you're eliciting some sort of just any information and it doesn't matter to you whether they live, you can push that person to the point of life and death in order to extract that information. So anyway, so I'm going to first be talking about psychological torture examples, but also there's a lot of overlap between that and physical torture, which we'll get to. Okay, so examples of psychological torture include being subjected to interrogation for long periods of time, which, as we can assume, the U.S. doesn't abide by that.
Right.
Hi. Aren't they allowed to hold you for 24 hours?
I think so.
I think
Is it 24?
Without charges.
within the U.S. domestic criminal and civil space, yes, but not necessarily abroad, or if somebody is a possible enemy combatant.
Right.
Yep. That's indefinite, I believe.
Yeah, well, that's what we've been seeing.
They could subject you to blackmailing, to chalkboard scraping, which is exactly what you think it is. And actually, some researchers did studies into what exactly it is about nails on a chalkboard that offends people so much.
Yeah.
And they think it might be because that certain, not only like the sound, but like the specific pitches register something in our brains that like harkens back to predatory days of like monkeys, that their alarm calls, their alarm screams are equally as offensive to the ear.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Is that weird?
It also probably depends on an individual's like sense of hearing, because like biological men and women can like hear different octaves and pitches differently.
That is a pretty universal offensive sound, though.
Yeah. I do think some people are more sensitive to it than others, though. And I might just have like poor hearing, but like I feel like I'm less sensitive to it than some.
Even thinking about it makes my teeth wiggle. I don't like it. Quote unquote Chinese water torture, which is
I have done that to Zach.
Yeah.
He deserved it, though. I've told this story.
I don't
remember this.
we were in DC for a summer doing internships and rented an apartment, and it was furnished or whatever, and they had these like nice embroidered like Turkish pillows on the bed. And we went out and Zach got obliterated drunk, and I was like barely drunk. And we went home early because he was a mess. And we were really young. We were like 22. And went back to the apartment, and he had to throw up. So I like got everything ready. I like laid him in the bed. I got him like a trash can to throw up in. I moved the pillows across the room. Like he's on one side of the bed. They are fully on the other side of the room, away from him.
Oh, no.
Because I knew that he was going to throw up. Got him all set. And then I'm like watching TV in the living room and like monitoring his breathing and making sure he's not like choking to death, as you do on a fun Saturday night. And he proceeds to sit bolt upright in bed, ignore the trash bin next to him, and projectile vomit across the room only on the pillows.
Oh, okay.
Like targeted. And they're destroyed. And I was really, really pissed off at him. And so I put him in the bathtub drunk for the rest of the night. So he slept the rest of the night in the bathtub with his head under the faucet.
And you dripped on him.
And it dripped on him all night.
Okay, well, he kind of did that to himself.
I know.
But you're
fine.
also kind of a monster, and I fear for your child. But also, here's the definition of Chinese water torture.
Okay.
AKA a dripping machine, which I feel like is a more PC way of putting it. So this is a mentally painful process in which cold water is slowly dripped onto the scalp, forehead, or face for a prolonged period of time. The process causes fear and mental deterioration in the subject. The pattern of the drops is often irregular, and the cold sensation is jarring, which causes anxiety as the person tries to anticipate the next drip.
He slept like a baby.
Well, I have a photo. I have a photo of Zach on the drive, which will be on the blog. then.
Wait, what?
There's a photo of the water torture.
There is?
Yes. Well, it's not a photo. It's a it's an illustration.
Oh, okay.
And do we believe that this was actually like first practiced in China, or is that just like a racist?
No, I think that is what is believed, but I'm not going to call it that.
This is
Let's just
very
call it
dramatic.
a dripping machine.
This photo.
That's an accurate illustration of Zach's face
What you did to
as
Zach,
you were
yeah.
doing. That's you in the back with the pointed hat.
Yep, laughing
had
to your friend.
The worst torture
It's
was
you.
that the next day I made him go to brunch at like 10 a.m.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
You are a fucking freak.
I was really mad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have a unique brand
Mad
of
enough to get up at
retaliation.
10 a.m., which is not a
Right.
thing you usually do.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would personally never choose to go to brunch that early.
She was 22. I could be up at dawn for a run after a night
Right.
out at
I know,
22. My
is
God.
different. I know.
Oh,
Oh, to
absolutely
go
not.
back.
Absolutely not.
Okay, more psychological torture. We have the ego fragmentation, which is the complete loss of subjective self-identity. There are several ways of getting to this, but it's basically just like breaking you down on a very base level.
Like, what's it called? What's the word? What? Brainwashing.
Mm.
Kind of, but this is like this is like breaking you down. Like even with brainwashing, if you were to be like, "Oh, you got to follow this cult leader or whatever,"
Mm-hmm.
this is nothing. This is nothing. There's no hope. There's no savior. It's nothing. You are just a flat, clear blob. There's nothing.
Okay.
Then we have exploitation of phobias, like for example, a mock execution, or maybe if they knew you were an arachnophobe, if they left you in a room full of spiders.
Okay. Sounds horrible.
I
Don't like
hate
it.
that. Okay.
We've got forced nudity. We've got learned helplessness, which I think is related to the ego fragmentation.
Yeah,
So-
having to like ask if you can take a sip of water, ask if you can go to the bathroom, ask if you can. Yeah.
Yep. And I think that was particularly employed like if somebody made several escape attempts or something like that, like they would just like fucking beat you the fuck down so you just had no like sense of autonomy at all.
Yeah.
Mm.
Then we have music torture.
Or podcast torture. which
Podcast
is
torture.
Like our
Guantanamo
favorite,
Bay.
our favorite
Guantanamo
review.
Mm-hmm.
I hear they play this podcast on repeat
I
at
love that.
Guantanamo Bay.
It's the best.
We
I
have
wish we could use the downloads.
I know, right? God. Help us out, Guantanamo
Putting it
Bay.
out there.
If you're listening to this in Guantanamo Bay, please write us an iTunes review. It really helps us out.
Yes.
You could win free merch.
Then we have pharmacological torture. So the aim of this is to force compliance by causing distress, which could be in the form of pain, anxiety, psychological disturbance, immobilization, or disorientation.
Or like what they did to Alan Turing, where they like gave him horrible like hormone therapy to
Ugh.
punish him because he was gay.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And it was like chemical castration.
Yep. So that's exactly what this would be. So one form of this torture involves forcibly injecting a person with an addictive drug in order to induce physical dependence. And then once the drug is withdrawn and the person is in withdrawal, the interrogation can start and they can say like, no, we're only going to give you this heroin after you answer our questions or whatever. And their dependency is so acute and so strong that that's just what they do. They have no choice.
It can also be used in like human trafficking situations.
1000%. Yep. We have sensory deprivation, sleep deprivation, and then what's called stress positions, also known as submission positions. So these place the human body in such a way that a great amount of weight is placed on just one or two muscles.
God,
It's like
I
my
can't
worst
even-
fucking nightmare.
I know. On my back. Anything.
Yeah.
It could be like sit in this ergonomic chair
Yeah.
for more than 4 hours. And
Can't do it. I'll tell you all you need to know.
yeah.
Honestly, that's like what a desk job is
Yeah.
a constant stress position.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, a subject may be forced to stand on the balls of their feet and then squat so that their thighs are parallel to the ground. There is a photo on the drive, which will be on the blog, of
Yeah.
it's of a Viet Cong prisoner. And they have American soldiers who have tied this person's arms behind their back and like a board so they cannot move their arms. They're stuck behind their back, tied. And then I think somehow tied the wrists to the ankles or something like that. So they're forced into this crouching position for God knows how long.
Time.
Mm-hmm.
So I will say that in some cultures, like squatting, I'm not saying that about this photo at all, like not excusing this at all. But I'm saying in some cultures, like it's way more common to sit in a deep squat like that for long periods of time.
But
so
not
like,
with your arms.
Not with your
the
arms.
The difference is the arms.
Right.
Yeah.
So like you can kind of, if you're used to it, you'd probably be more comfortable for longer. But whereas like the three of us are not fucking used to squatting like that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, not fun.
Squatting like that with our arms free would probably be torturous for us who are not used to that position. But the fact that their arms,
right,
it's like almost a dislocation of the shoulders too.
Right.
So again, this creates an intense amount of pressure on the legs, leading first to pain and then to muscle failure. Other examples of a stress position are the jetliner position, which is basically just a wall sit. Something called the Murga punishment, and Murga in at least one, I think several languages means rooster. So this is a punishment where a person must use your imagination, but there is also a photo on the drive of this. But the person squats and then loops their arms behind the knees and then holds onto their earlobes.
Yeah.
So like
Weird.
the opposite earlobe.
That would be really painful for the lower back.
I can barely do this sitting in a regular position, just holding my own earlobes with my opposite hands. Imagine looping your arms underneath your knees and doing that.
Having to be in any one position for an extended period of time can be detrimental. Yeah. You could be laying down flat, and if it's for long enough without being allowed to move, that can be a stress position. Being upside down.
No, we'll get to that. There's also a position called the strappado. Well, here we go. The victim's hands are tied behind his back, and then the victim is suspended by a rope attached to the wrists. And like, that's it. So this typically results in dislocated shoulders. And then on top of that, weights might be added to the body to intensify the effect and increase the pain.
I think that is it was sanctioned during the Bush administration as a legal form of enhanced interrogation, literally that stress position.
Well, that's bizarre because this type of torture would generally not last more than an hour without rest, as it would likely result in death. So they can dangle them there for at most an hour. There's an illustration on the drive of this as well. It's really fucking gross. And like the person in the illustration, their like legs are tucked up. I think just because it's so painful, you're just trying not to dangle in too many positions.
Yeah.
Like you want to keep all your weight towards the front of your body instead of down by your feet because it would be less stress on your shoulders. I don't know. It's fucking gross. Okay. Psychological torture. Threat of permanent or severe disfigurement. So just the threat of it. We've got tickle torture, Amanda. I think we'll get to it. This actually falls under physical torture as well. Waterboarding, also physical torture. And then what's called the welcome parade. So like if you're a new prisoner in a prison environment, they like send you through a gauntlet of people like hitting you, yelling at you, kicking you. Like it's not meant to like kill you or anything, but it's just meant to be like all these people know who the fuck you are.
Right.
And they're letting them blow off steam. Like the other prisoners blow off steam.
Like, get used to it. This is your life now.
It's very Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah. But it's called the welcome parade, which is so fucking gross.
Yeah, that's really creepy.
And then what's called the white room torture or just white torture. So I've heard about this, but I didn't really think about what it entailed, and this is so fucking disturbing. So visually, the prisoner is deprived of all color. Their cell is completely white, the walls, floor, and ceiling, as well as their clothes and their food. Neon tubes are positioned above the occupant in such a way that no shadows appear. Auditorily, the cell is soundproof and void of any sound, voices, or social interaction. Guards stand in silence wearing padded shoes to avoid making any noise. Prisoners cannot hear anything but themselves. In terms of taste and smell, the prisoner is fed white food, which classically means unseasoned white rice, to deprive them of these senses. Further, all surfaces are smooth, robbing them of the sensation of touch. Detainees are often held for months or even years. The effect of white torture are well documented in a number of testimonials. Typically, prisoners will become depersonalized by losing personal identity for extended periods of isolation, causing hallucinations or even psychotic breaks. And I read one account of this guy who was held in a white cell for about 8 months or so. Ugh. And when he came out, he said, I'm not a person anymore. I don't remember my parents' faces.
Oh.
It's completely wiped.
It's
God.
just the fact that anyone came up with that.
I know. Fucking gross.
Is maybe the creepiest part.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then I have a
Okay, so now for something really fun. Here we go.
Okay, so now for even more shit.
So I have an alphabetical list of physical torture. Here we go.
I feel like a lot of what we've covered is pretty physical.
Like I said, it overlaps. The physical torture is much longer, so I'm only going to stop if something needs a definition, because a lot of them do not. Such as acid attack, blinding with light, boiling, burying alive, burning, the blood eagle we've discussed, bone breaking, bamboo torture.
What's that? Just sharp bamboo?
Yeah, it's the nail.
It's under
the nail
fingernails.
Oh. But there's also nailing, which is the removal of fingernails and toenails, but it doesn't specify that it's by bamboo shards.
Also, removing of nipples.
I don't have that. Nippling.
Yeah, the Gestapo was really into that.
Okay. We have birching, which is basically just lashing with a birch branch. I love a good birch.
I do love birch.
But they're kind of flexible, slender. They're more like whips.
Yeah, they're really fucking painful, I imagine.
Branding, castor oil. And so castor oil, I guess, makes you shit and barf a bunch.
Oh, we will get to the things to create forced diarrhea.
Okay. So castor oil, as far as I could tell, just prompts evacuation of the bowels, and it was used to debilitate people, but also to embarrass them.
Mm-hmm.
So castor oil. We got cigarette burns, castration, which FYI is just the removal of the testicles, not the whole penis. Mm-hmm. We'll get to it. We talked about Chinese water torture, cold cell torture, which I'm assuming is just being in a really cold, not lethally cold, but really fucking cold place.
Mm-hmm. Or just as simple as not letting anybody have a blanket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In a jail cell over the weekend.
Hmm. Combing, aka carding. So I don't know if you've ever seen wool being carded, raw wool from a sheep.
Mm-hmm.
They have those combs with really long prongs, and that's what they use to comb out the wool. That's what carding is, but they use that on a person's skin and just
really horrible dry brushing, but with
scraping, yeah, bloody, scratches.
Shredding you.
They shred you.
Like boiled chicken.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. We've got crucifixion, crushing, cutting, disembowelment, dismemberment, dehydration, denailing, like I said, fingers and toes, disfigurement, death by drowning, dry boarding. So it's the opposite of waterboarding. So this induces asphyxiation through stuffing the subject's airways with rags and then taping their nose and mouth shut.
Oh my God.
And probably just any other kind of asphyxiation, like a plastic bag on and off.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't need to be rags necessarily, but
Right.
that's dry boarding.
Ugh. This is bad.
Dunking, enemas, emasculation, which is cutting off the penis and the testicles.
Oh.
Okay.
Or just belittling.
Well,
That would be more psychological.
Emasculation as a form of torture, I think, is just cutting
The
it
whole
right
thing.
off. Yeah.
Okay.
Flagellation, flaying, foot roasting. We don't need a description about that.
Oh,
Foot
God.
whipping, which is also known as bastinado. Force feeding, strangling, or using a garrote.
I think garrote.
Garrote. It's gross.
It is gross.
It is gross. Genital mutilation and or forced circumcision. Hamstringing, which is when they just cut your hamstrings so you can't walk.
No. We're done. It's over. We're done.
not done. We're only
We're
to
only
the
on the
H's.
H's.
We just started the H's.
Are you fucking kidding me?
We got half hanging. We got hanging, drawn, and quartering. Impalement, immurement, aka live entombment, being
So,
buried alive, basically.
Buried alive, but like in a bigger tomb.
Yeah, or not. I don't know. Depends
Look
on how
at
much
Amanda's
space you have.
face.
I hate this.
We covered the jetliner position. That's basically a wall sit. We've covered keel hauling in our executions, which is when you're strapped to the keel of a ship. Or wait, no, what is it?
You're pulled
You're
on a
pu-
pulley
you're
under
pulled
over the keel
along.
of the ship.
Yeah. And so all the barnacles scrape you up and then
And
the
you're just
and the
underwater
sharks
for
can
a
get
long
you.
time.
Yeah. You're probably going to die.
This is okay.
Kneecapping, which is but it's most commonly modernly if you're just shot
Mafia.
shot at a close range in the tops of your knees.
And is it
So
just because it's
fucks up your
very
knees.
painful and slow recovery?
Yeah. Well, you
Okay.
can't walk. It's like you're going to chase them.
Okay.
Something called menial, which I gather to be slavery or just some sort of servitude.
Okay.
Mutilation, noise, just
Relentless noise.
Yeah, so you can't sleep usually.
necklacing, which we've discussed. It's very popular in South Africa, actually. So you put a rubber tire around a person's neck.
Yes.
And then you light it on fire, or you douse it in some sort of fuel and then you light it on fire.
Oh my
It's
God.
it's a slow death, but there's just flames all around
and
your
somebody
face.
and you're restrained somehow so you can't remove the tire.
yes.
Jesus.
Yep.
Oubliette. So oubliette is it's a type of dungeon where it's a big underground dungeon, and then the only exit is a hatch or a hole or some sort of door at the very top. So it's too tall for you to escape from. So think of Aladdin when he first meets Jafar in the
It's
dungeon.
just a hole.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there just a hole at the top?
Yeah, we will
Or
get
did I
to
dream
it.
that?
I don't
That's called
remember if it's in Aladdin, but we will get to an oubliette type thing. And it comes from the verb oublier, which means to forget. So literally you're just thrown down there and forgotten
And
about.
left. Yeah.
Oh, it's
Best
so bad.
case scenario.
Mhm.
Worst case scenario, there's additional torture within the pit.
Ugh.
Wow.
It's also sometimes called a bottle dungeon because it's kind of shaped like a bottle.
And there is a really great bar and jazz club in Paris called the Caveau des Oubliettes.
Ooh, it's one oubliette I'd like to get into.
I'd like to get to know that oubliette.
I won't forget that oubliette.
Oh, Lord.
Okay, then we have oxygen deprivation, paria, which I guess is just electric shock, pitch capping. So this is so gross. It involves pouring hot pitch meaning tar.
Yep.
So at the time, this this term was mainly used for waterproofing seams in the sides of ships or boats.
Mhm.
So like pitch, like the angle. So you'd put the tar over the pitch. So you pour the tar into a conical shaped paper cap, which was forced onto a bound subject's head, allowed to cool, and then just ripped off.
Oh, so you're just scalping them.
Yep.
It's like getting a wax
on the top of your head.
Worst wax.
A terrible wax on the top, the whole top of your head.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is fucked up.
Then we have pliers, pressure points, rape, rat torture. We've talked about rat torture. So like a diseased or a hungry rat is just like you're somehow opened up and then the rat's like in you and then it just
or
like eats its way out.
Food is put on you and
this is very American Psycho.
Yep. There's something called riding the rail, which was a punishment most prevalent in the U.S. in the 18th and 19th centuries, in which an offender was made to straddle a fence rail, which was held on the shoulders of two or more people. So the subject was then paraded around town or taken to the city limits and dumped by the roadside.
Wow.
So that was kind of just a more embarrassing thing. I wouldn't call it torture, but
I don't know.
Sounds pretty bad.
Yeah.
I
thought that was something else. I think that there's other things that are involved in riding the rail, but I'm blanking on.
Well, I looked at 2 different articles, but if you find something else, I'm more than happy to learn about it. There's something called the Swedish drink, which is basically forcing somebody to drink like noxious liquids, like poop. Like,
okay.
Poop.
Yeah.
Why is that called Sweden? Okay, fine.
I don't want it. I don't
Swedish fish.
I'm not taking a side.
I do hate schnapps.
Really?
Yeah, not a fan.
Even in like a mixed. Oh, okay. Even in
Really?
a stump puller? You're a Minnesotan.
Oh my God.
All right, we've got sawing, we've got scalping, we've got scaphism, which I think we talked about maybe in the wrongful executions. So this is also known as getting the boats. This is when you trap a victim between 2 boats, and you're usually in like a wooden box, like hung between 2 boats.
Okay.
You're force-fed and also covered in milk and honey.
Hate it.
We will get to it.
So the milk and the honey eventually gives you like horrible diarrhea and digestive issues. So then you're barfing and shitting. And then also you're continuing to be covered in the milk and honey. So all these like bugs and shit are attracted to you. So you die from dehydration and all the pooping, barfing stuff. And then also you're slowly being eaten alive by insects and other vermin.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Corey's home.
Oh my God.
Yep.
We have what's called a shrimp tie, which is like a specific way of tying somebody up in a particular way. And this kind of crosses over with some of the BDSM situation.
Right. And if it's consensual,
Go for it. Yeah.
right.
Tie your shrimps, honey.
Mm-hmm. We've got sensory overload, sexual assault, the shin bone crusher.
Don't go. We get it. Next.
We get it. Sleep deprivation, sound. So this would be extremely high volumes, dynamic range, low frequency, high pitched noise intended to interfere with rest, cognition, and concentration. We've got starvation, stoning. We talked about the strappado. This is also known as reverse hanging. Stress positions we talked about. Tarring and feathering, a thumb screw we talked about in the wrongful execution. Tickle torture, Amanda. Tooth extraction, walling, which is they in modern times, the U.S. used this at Guantanamo and other places. They put like some sort of rubber, like a flexible collar on a person. And then it wasn't super clear to me whether this person was like pulled by their collar against a concrete wall. And so then like their head didn't necessarily hit it, but it's like extreme trauma to the neck and the shoulders and the
wasn't it
the back.
if they fell asleep, then they would be brought against the like chain, and so then they would be like quickly like choked and jerked awake.
I think so.
I hate this episode.
I know. I'm almost done. Then we got the waist chop, which is just cutting someone in half at the waist. Water cure, which is force feeding water to extremes, which can kill you.
It can kill you, yeah.
Yeah.
Waterboarding, and then again the welcome parade, the gamut thing.
And that's probably not even all.
Mm-mm.
Oh no, this is the Wikipedia list. So humans are very creative and very awful, and I hate everything about this. And that's really all I have to say about it.
What else can you say? Humans are awful, and
I don't
we
want
just
to
come
say
up with
anything
really
else.
inventive ways to
be
inflict
awful.
lots of harm on each other.
Yes, all that.
Cool. My case, there's people are horrible because of colonialism, and then they're also horrible because of like absolute power and despotism.
Okay.
Cool.
So,
Got it. Great.
Enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What a combo.
So, Arthur Conolly was a well-known British intelligence officer,
Arthur Conan Doyle.
explorer, and writer in the mid-1800s. He was captain of the 6th Bengal Light Cavalry, working in service of the British East India Company. Not great. And in this role, he completed numerous reconnaissance missions into Central Asia. So think all of like the stands.
Yeah. All the stands.
All the stands. He often traveled in disguise using the name Conolly, which was like a play on words that sounded like his name, Conolly.
Conolly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he thought he was really clever. I mean, I would have been very proud of coming up with that too. But
I mean, that's what a lot of English to Chinese translations.
right. Like Zach's Chinese name was Kongzi Li, which was like supposed to be like his last name, Cohen, and Zachary. Anyway, so although it would later be popularized in the Richard Kipling novel Kim, Conolly was actually the person who coined the phrase "the Great Game," which described like the competing efforts, of the Russian and British empires trying to gain control over Central Asia, which like still exists today, and like the U.S. versus Russia, like trying to gain control over Afghanistan, kind of. Anyway, it's fine.
Oh, great. Got it.
So most people would say that this game began in 1837 when Queen Victoria took the throne and Britain began establishing more of a colonial presence in India. So like Brits were already in India for decades, if maybe even a century, but like they started to try to really take over more control and like wrest power away from local leaders. So Conolly himself played a major role in the Great Game by helping to overthrow an Afghan monarch and install a king who had agreed to align his country's policies with Britain's interests.
Okay.
After this success, Conolly became a go-to man for missions to spread Britain's influence around the world. One such mission was actually something of a rescue mission, and we will get to how horribly it turned out.
Oh, God.
He was sent to attempt to free a British diplomat named Charles Stoddart, who was being held against his will in Bukhara, which was an ancient city that is now part of present-day Uzbekistan. And there are photos on the drive of Bukhara. Very cool-looking place that I had absolutely never heard of. So Stoddart, the one that Conolly is trying to rescue, had been sent to Bukhara 3 years earlier to gain an audience with the emir. The emir's name was Nasrullah Khan, And he was trying to deliver a letter of reassurance that Britain had no intention of invading Bukhara.
Famous last words.
Even though they had literally just invaded Afghanistan, which is neighboring, and like we're taking over.
But you're fine.
Yeah.
Right.
We're not coming over there. You're good.
Why
And
would you
Stoddard,
worry at all?
just like everybody chill.
Yeah.
And just because we took over the country next to yours doesn't mean that you're at any
Right.
risk. So like probably you should drop your defenses.
Yeah.
Like give everybody the day off. It's fine.
Relax.
Just relax.
Don't be so hysterical.
God.
He also was sent to try to attempt the emir to free several Russian prisoners that he was already holding. So we've got one guy going to try to get prisoners freed, and then he becomes a prisoner, and then another guy going to set that guy free. So the second part of this mission might sound like confusing because Britain was fighting for control and power against the Russians, and then this British guy is sent to free Russian prisoners. But actually, strategically, there was a purpose. So he was trying to free the Russian prisoners so that Russia wouldn't have a pretext to invade Bukhara, and then Russia would lay off, and then Britain would have more influence in Bukhara long term.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't really matter. What matters is the guy that was sent, Stoddard, the first guy sent, was not the right man for this job.
Oh, dear.
So the mission required a delicate touch.
Okay.
And as one of Stoddard's acquaintances would later remark, quote, "To attack or defend a fortress, no better man than Stoddard can be found. But I'm just trying to be as blustery as I possibly can be.
I hate it.
But for a diplomatic mission requiring coolness and self-command, a man less adapted to the purpose could not readily have been met with."
Wow.
So basically, he was a fucking hothead, and they sent him on a diplomatic mission to a foreign country with an all-powerful despot leader who could give two fucks about this guy.
Right.
Got it.
It didn't go great. So, upon his arrival to Bukhara in December of 1838, Stoddard immediately committed several diplomatic faux pas. To begin with, he rode through the main square of the walled city in front of the emir's castle on horseback rather than walking, which was strictly forbidden because nobody else is supposed to be on horseback within the city other than the emir.
Okay.
And like, if he had just had like a local guide, they could have told him this.
Right.
Like if he had just done the bare minimum of diplomatic research.
Due diligence.
He's
Yeah.
a guy.
Furthermore, when the emir himself rode out on horseback, the rules of the emirate, had he been aware of them, would have made clear that he was supposed to immediately dismount his own horse. Because again, only the emir can be on horseback
Right.
in front of other people. But instead, Stoddard remained in his saddle and saluted the emir, which was the custom in Britain. So he just was like assuming that his culture was
Gonna carry
the
over
monoculture and the right way to do things in this other guy's fucking land. Finally, Stoddard arrived with no gift for the leader, which was also a deep insult. And like the basics of diplomacy.
Right.
Bring
right.
a gift. It's the basics of
You-
like
bring
attending
it-
a house party.
Yeah.
Right.
Even I know this.
You bring a wink wine.
Yep. Just grab
It's
some extra
not that
wine
hard.
out of the cupboard.
Always have extra wine on hand.
Try wing.com/gals.
But do it.
So, according to a written account of this initial meeting, the emir, quote, looked at Stoddard fixedly for some time and then passed on without saying a word. Just like a withering gaze, and then walked away.
I love a withering gaze.
Yikes.
And things did not get better from there.
You don't say.
So when Stoddart finally did gain an audience with Nasrullah and handed him a letter of introduction and a statement of the purpose of his visit, the emir immediately took note of the fact that this letter had not been signed by Queen Victoria herself and was again deeply insulted because he's like, I'm the fucking king of the world, basically.
Right.
And kings, interact with fellow people at their level. So I should be getting a letter from your queen, not from you random ass fucking lowly diplomat guy.
I'd be pissed too.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like when you show up and they're like, "Oh no, I'm so and so's assistant."
Right.
But I will share the message. I will take
I'll
detailed
forward
notes.
that email on your behalf.
Right. So by all accounts, Stoddart was just massively underprepared for this mission / not prepared at all and like deeply naive about the danger that he was walking into. He thought he would just stroll in there because he was British and like get all these people freed.
The confidence of a mediocre white man.
Yeah.
Always.
So had he done a bit more research on Nasrullah Khan, whose nickname was the Butcher,
Okay.
it might have been enough to make him proceed with greater caution. Nasrullah's official title, quote, the shadow of God upon earth,
Incredible. Okay.
did not provide much reassurance either. So basically it's like,
That's so gross. I
isn't
hate
that
it.
like the
That's
most
really
epic
scary.
I don't
Yeah.
like it. It gives me
My
chills.
next rabbit.
the shadow. Oh, this is my
Shadow of
money. The shadow,
Shadow
of God,
God
upon
upon
earth.
We call him Shadow for short.
Shad.
Shad.
Oh my God.
My friend Shad. I'm gonna. Oh.
Oh,
I gotta
Shad.
text him
What's
right
that
now.
short for?
So
It's short
Shadow of God upon Earth.
Yep.
yes.
I'm texting him. Oh, right now.
Please do. That is epic.
So this emir, Nasrullah, had ascended to the throne in 1826 after ordering the murder of his own father and his two older brothers.
NBD. They were in the way.
They were. They literally were.
They were in the way.
They were moving anyway.
Were they though?
And
That's
then,
a legit excuse.
And then after he became the emir, after doing this violent coup, like killing everybody that was in front of him in line, then just to be safe, he also had his 3 younger brothers and like a bunch of other relatives that could possibly make a claim to the throne killed as well. So he killed his entire, like every male in his family, basically.
Got to. Wipe out the competition, baby.
Which
Go,
is actually-
Shad.
A very common thing also in like the Ottoman Empire. Like a lot of
Absolutely.
like sultans would just like kill all of the men.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically take out anybody who could be competition for the throne.
Right.
Praying
I'm here
mantis
for it.
style.
And then that buys you like 18 years of calm until
Nature
your
does it.
sons start to get
Right.
old enough. Anyway, so he was also an infamously cruel leader. And one of his claims to fame was a 21-foot deep pit covered by an iron grill
Oh, God.
and accessible only by rope. And this was within the prison compound behind his palace. So in Oubliette.
Ooh.
Has anybody here watched Ozark on
Yeah.
Netflix? Okay.
I'm
I
not caught up,
need to
though.
start. No, I haven't started. I know I need to.
It's so good. But
It's really good.
we've got a pit, we've got torture, we've got sound.
Yep.
I like ramen hair.
Yeah.
Girl with the
she's
ramen
good.
hair. Yeah,
Oh,
she's good.
Yes. Ramen hair.
Yeah.
Her hair looks like ramen in that
Young
show.
Justin
I'm
Timberlake.
sorry.
I
Yeah.
know, it's supposed to.
It's gonna be May hair.
It's gotta be May.
So, okay, his subjects referred to the pit as Sia Cha, which
See ya later.
yes, Cha,
Cha,
Which
put
tra-
me in the pit.
Cha, you're in the pit.
Job.
Cha, you'll be fine. Which See ya, cha. Which translates to black well or black hole.
Oh,
Right.
fun. I love that.
So
I really love that.
anyone who displeased Nasrullah was at risk of being thrown into this pit, which would have been unpleasant enough on its own, but it gets so much worse.
I need a pit that I can throw people in who displease me.
Right?
Okay, Buffalo Jill.
Listen, I
Yeah.
do have really deep egress window wells. I should
do.
start making my pit.
Yeah.
People are just going to fall into your pit.
Craft
New
your pit.
yard project. Building my pit.
Do I need a permit to build a pit in my backyard?
Not even a little bit.
Just check for electricity lines.
Yeah, call before you dig.
Never call before you dig your pit.
So
It raises way too many questions.
we get so many flyers about call before you dig. It's
I
like
know,
the
right?
one thing the government really cares about.
And never once have I done
COVID
it.
who?
I've never
Call
done.
before you dig.
I have never dug.
No.
I know. I literally get like a flyer like once a month about call before you dig.
I know they're all sponsored by Mike Rowe too.
Oh, God.
All right. Okay. So Nasrullah also ordered that the pit be kept stocked with a variety of rodents,
Snacks?
scorpions,
Oh.
and other stinging insects.
Did
No.
you say snacks?
Snacks.
Snacks for the rodents,
A
which are
properly
people.
stocked pit. Yeah.
Actually, he did actually keep it stocked with snacks for the rodents, and we will get to it.
Well,
So the practice of using insects as torture devices likely dates back to ancient Persia and has been practiced around the world.
oh my God.
But Nasrullah seems to have been one of history's most enthusiastic practitioners of this method.
Oh, it's bad.
He carefully selected the insects that would induce maximum pain, but
Oh,
not
like
death,
Scorpions and things that sting.
including one called the assassin bug.
No.
I haven't seen that on my island.
The assassin bug is notable for its thick, curved beak.
It would
Used.
catch a pretty price at the market on the island.
Ish.
Are you? Is this,
Duck brothers.
Timmy and Tommy will pay a pretty penny.
is this Animal Crossing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Add that to the list. Alphabetically, it's up there. It's early on.
guys.
Okay.
With like the height of
Is
the
my
early
favorite face of Kenyans.
of early COVID lockdown, I was playing so much Animal Crossing, and this is before Bill and I like moved in together. And I was at his house, and I was playing it in bed. And he's just like quietly, I don't know, like watching TV, doing whatever. And I caught a water bug, and without even explaining anything, I literally yelled, "This will fetch a pretty price at the market in the morning." And Bill was like, "What the fuck are you talking?"
And he still moved in with you.
It's a pretty price.
And then we bought a house together, so it's fine. This shall fetch a pretty price at market in the morning.
Is it
Dropbox?
British? Do people
Oh,
have
a bag?
accents?
No,
No.
it's just Amanda. It's actually
Oh,
Japanese.
Yeah, I just was taken over by a spirit.
Okay. Okay. Back to the assassin bug, which
Oh, right.
there are pictures on the
Love.
drive, but I don't know if it's the same.
Ooh.
I feel like other bugs over the years have been given that moniker, so I don't know if
I'm
these are
good. I'm
correct.
charging my mouse anyway, so I will not be going to the
I
drive.
will be.
Great.
So this assassin bug that we're talking about is notable for its thick, curved beak used for piercing its prey and injecting a toxic saliva that paralyzes and kills other insects, and contains an enzyme that liquefies the innards of prey so that the assassin bug can then suck the liquid out.
Good.
It's like
Evolution is
It's like
amazing.
Ebola and a venomous thing in one.
I feel
Okay,
like
so
bugs. Go ahead.
when this bug bites a person, because people are big,
Right.
There's no
I assume
way
it
that
only
happened.
liquefies a localized little
Correct.
spot.
Yeah.
And like probably necrotizes the tissue, and then the bug. Okay,
Exactly.
I was just gonna say, I feel
exactly,
like
Dr.
bugs
Phil.
have such like intense evil superpowers because they're all like this
Because they're
big.
tiny.
Yeah, they're tiny.
Yeah.
So this is
Right.
the way they eat.
And also, in answer to your question, Amanda, about Animal Crossing, I would say that this most closely resembles the violin beetle, but it's
yes.
not
Okay.
because
Okay.
it doesn't have the long, you know.
Okay. So exactly like Amanda said,
She knows.
She does.
these insects don't typically target humans
Mhm.
because they want to just like kill another bug that's
Right.
like a good size for them.
have
for
their
a meal.
bug
eat a
slushy
human.
and then leave.
Suck out the innards and then
Yeah.
move on with their day.
Yep.
But when deprived of their typical food sources, they will feed on any live tissue.
Oh, great.
So their sting has been compared to being pierced with a hot needle, and the enzyme that they inject causes suppurating pores. So yeah, basically, yes, it'll cause a little spot
Don't Google
to
that.
die on your
Oh.
body.
To fester, to undergo the formation of pus.
Yeah, and pus and liquefy, and then it'll suck out from that spot. And then when it's hungry again, it'll just find a new spot.
God, nature is amazing.
Nope.
Yep. So Nasrullah made sure that the pit's inhabitants were well fed on chunks of raw meat, snacks,
Oh, God.
when there was no human prisoner for them to feast on.
Ooh,
But-
expand their tummies. Get them nice and hungry.
Get them used to like chunks of meat
Yeah.
instead of other bugs.
Yeah.
This
And-
is insane.
Yeah, and don't worry, there was usually a prisoner for them to feast on because he was very easily displeased.
I mean, same.
Yeah. And so this became the naive Stoddart's fate for
Yeah.
offending the Emir.
For riding a
this
horse
is his new apartment.
instead of walking.
You fucking
Yeah.
idiot.
You fucking idiot. It could have been so easy.
If you had just Googled it
Yeah.
before you arrived.
Talk to anyone.
Any person.
Oh no.
So before Conolly was sent to free Stoddart, Stoddart spent 3 years as Nasrullah's prisoner,
In the pit?
cycling through phases of being in the leader's favor and treated comparatively well and like a guest. Not an honored guest, but a guest. And then doing something to cause offense, and then he'd get thrown back in the bug pit, which is honestly worse than being in the bug pit consistently.
Right, yeah.
For
Getting
years.
that little bit of
Well, they get
recovery.
hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but then you're always afraid that you're going to be
Right.
thrown back in the pit.
Mm-hmm.
And you would be.
I mean, Nasrullah knew what he was
He
doing.
fucking knew exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
Sometimes Stoddart was thrown into the pit not because of anything he himself had done, but because Nasrullah was upset by some action that the British Empire had taken.
Well, yeah.
no.
And as the diplomat, he was sent to the pit.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine living your life where just at any moment, you could be dragged into the pit?
We would as Americans, we would always be in the pit.
Oh.
Can you imagine trying
Can
to
you
survive
imagine
this during the Trump
Going from
administration?
Obama to
Oh no.
Yes.
You know what? Just put me in the pit.
You're
I'm
just
done.
like, how'd Tuesday in November go? How's that election? Did everybody vote? Did the millennials vote? Did Gen Z vote? Did they?
Only 40%
Did they?
of the population voted.
Okay. I'm getting most of my suppurating sores from last time have healed up.
I'm ready to go back in the pit.
Yeah. So the British
Shad liked my suggestion, by the way,
Of course.
of Shad being short for in the shadow of God upon
Right.
earth.
Right.
Yeah.
So the British did kind of the bare minimum to try to get Stoddart out during these 3 years. So they sent several letters attempting to get his release, but because none of them were signed by the Queen, the Emir ignored them all.
The Ant Queen?
No, the Queen of England.
The Queen Victoria.
What if it had to be signed by, like, the Bug Queen? She's like, my people aren't done with you yet.
So Stoddart himself was occasionally allowed to write letters, and in one sent to Conolly shortly before his arrival, he wrote, "The favor of the Emir is increased in these days towards me. I believe you will be treated well here," which is like totally a hostage letter. I am being treated very well. Come here.
You'll love it.
So Stoddart, according to one source, quote, had an incomprehensible lack of political judgment.
Yeah, you don't say.
But he can't be faulted for a shortage of optimism.
I mean,
That's kind of a burn, though.
Yeah,
That's the point.
exactly what it is. It's a very British insult.
Yeah, it is.
So at first, he seemed he might be right. So upon Conolly's arrival, both men were treated fairly well. Conolly had done the bare minimum of research and didn't immediately offend the Emir. But unfortunately for them, Britain soon suffered a catastrophic strategic loss in Afghanistan, and the king that Conolly had helped install there was overthrown. And so Nasrullah surmised from this that Britain was no longer a military threat to him, because he was like, well, they just lost next door. So how powerful can they be? Fuck them. And so he had even less of a reason to treat the diplomats well. And also he had suffered zero consequences from throwing this guy in the bug pit for 3 years.
Yeah. Why would I change?
Whatever.
Bug pit.
This is working out really well. No notes.
So in addition, tensions began heightening between Bukhara and its neighbors, and Nasrullah blamed Conolly, who had been traveling in the area and had visited some of his enemies before showing up. And he was like, well, you instigated these conflicts, which is probably not true, but whatever. He was kind of the scapegoat. And so the final straw for Nasrullah came when he learned that a recent letter he had sent to Queen Victoria had instead been answered by the Governor General of India. And he was like, I am fucking over you guys.
Yeah.
I am the Emir. I wrote a letter to the fucking Queen.
The
she
Queen's
didn't
gotta
even
write me
get
back.
it. Yeah.
She left me on red.
So enraged at the British Empire, Nasrullah turned his ire on the two diplomats. Both men were thrown back into the bug pit,
Oh, God.
where they spent the better part of the next year
No.
having the flesh slowly gnawed off their bodies
Oh, my God. This pant.
with few
This
periods
pant.
of reprieve.
This pant. It's criminal.
Unlivable.
God.
It's entomological.
So
It's full of bugs.
It's full of bugs. Oh, it's terrible.
it totally sucks.
It's terrible.
So then in November of 1842, rumors began to make their way home to Britain that Conolly and Stoddart had been executed. A group of friends of the two men began collecting money to fund an expedition to find out their fates once and for all. I would not have gone.
Volunteered.
No thanks.
If
Free
the two
work
of you
vacay.
disappeared in a foreign country under weird circumstances, there
You
might have
just
been a
let-
bug pit involved.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, R.I.P.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No,
You count
yeah.
your losses. Let it go.
Yeah.
Well,
At some point.
I'll make
Yeah.
new friends.
I get it.
You won't, but that's fine. You don't need friends.
I'll
You
be
have
fine.
plenty of backups in
I will
Iowa.
be fine
You're
with
good.
not making new friends.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
So a man named Joseph Wolfe, an Anglican priest, was chosen to make this journey to Bukhara because, again, British fucking cultural blinders, they thought well, he's an Anglican priest, so they have to respect him. But that means fucking nothing.
Yeah, to this culture of
Right.
people. Yeah.
But unlike Stoddart, he fully understood the danger of his mission and did as much research as he could on the emir and on Bukhara's local customs before he showed up. Having learned that a visitor was expected to bow 3 times upon meeting the emir while saying in Arabic, "Peace be to the king," he memorized this phrase and did exactly that. And in fact, he was so nervous that he bowed continuously, like more than 3 times, and just kept repeating the phrase until the emir laughed and told him to stop.
And laughed and told him to get in the pit.
It was just like, you know what? 3 doesn't seem like enough. I'm just gonna, it's like Parmesan. You just tell me when.
Uh-huh.
I would do the same thing.
Absolutely.
You'd have to peel me off the ground from my bow.
Well, yeah, right. Your back would start to act up.
That's true. I'm bowing in my mind. I'm bowing to you.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So Wolfe made a good enough impression on the mercurial leader that he was given permission to meet with Bukhara's commander of the artillery, who had also been Stoddart and Conolly's jailer, and to receive a firsthand account of their fates. So the commander described to Wolfe how Conolly and Stoddart had spent 2 full months in the bug pit until, quote, masses of their flesh had been gnawed off their bones.
Nope.
Also, like, infection.
Oh, yeah. The fact that they survived is actually fucking incredible.
Eventually, Nasrullah had ordered the men be removed from the pit and beheaded, making a point to explain
Sweet
how their
relief.
execution
Seriously.
would be more humane than those carried out in neighboring kingdoms because, quote, strangling gives more pain, and the rascal Khan of Khiva strangles his people, and therefore, out of mercy, I command the heads of the evildoers to be cut off with a common knife.
I would rather that have happened
From the beginning.
years earlier, before the bugs, pre-bug.
Yeah.
But this idea of like beheading being an easier form of execution than like hanging or some other form carried on into like Tudor fucking England. Like that's why Anne Boleyn was beheaded and not hanged.
Well, yeah, I mean, in a lot of it, probably most circumstances it was, because being hanged, as we know,
Can take a while.
Yeah.
can take a while. That in itself is a form of torture.
Right.
That's why a lot of people. So, one other thing that I read in my torture notes, instead of hanging like regularly, like your feet down, they built this contraption that actually like shot you up in the air. It was like reverse hanging.
Oh my God.
It was like
And it was supposed to kill you faster, but it super did not.
like
That sounds
bungee jumping almost.
horrible.
Yeah. It's like opposite hanging.
Also, we didn't have time to like get to it, but like what Lucy said about the scaphism, like is also rumored to have happened, but there's less evidence of that. But like the milk and honey, and then the diarrhea, and then the bugs.
The bugs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
And so Conolly and Stoddart's horrifying ordeal came to an end on June 4th, 1842, when they were beheaded in the public square. The official charge against them was spying for the British Empire. And the Anglican guy got the news and got out of there alive.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
To the pit.
Okay, great.
He bowed his whole way out.
He was like, yes, very
Gotta go,
merciful.
gotta go.
Great
Bye,
call.
bye.
You did the right thing, Amir. Gotta go. Bye-bye. Yeah.
I forgot I have I have
Horse?
a task rabbit coming. I'm so
I will-
sorry. I'm so
I will
sorry.
I
never
left
ride
the
a
oven
horse.
on. Left the oven on. Gotta go.
Exactly. And that is my case.
Hate it.
Wow.
Love it. Gross. Love it. Thank you. Hate it.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Really bad.
Really bad stuff.
Wow. Really bad.
Great. Okay, so this isn't a torture story in the same way that like Kenyon was a clear torture story.
Oh,
But
God.
I read in the fan picker notes that they wanted tickling covered. So I found this really fucked up case. I have no words for this fucker, but my job is to write words about these fuckers, so I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
Trigger warning, child sexual abuse. And I'm also going to be spending most of my case letting the victims tell these stories by reading their own words and statements, because I felt like that was the best way to kind of honor their experiences.
Great.
Okay.
But first, some backstory. So in 2016, the UK football community, meaning soccer, was rocked to its core at the release of a years-long investigative report into the conduct of youth coaches and abuse allegations against them.
No.
One monster in particular, and since we were specifically instructed to cover tickling-ish, is Barry Bennell.
Hate it.
Barry was a youth football player himself, and as an adult wanted to continue his football career as a youth coach. He worked for English professional football clubs in the 80s and 90s, including Manchester City, Crewe Alexandra, Stoke City, Leeds United, and was the head coach of the Staffordshire Stone Dominoes. So cute.
The Stone
Dominoes. While coaching for the Dominoes in 1994, the team toured in the United States. During that tour, a 13-year-old player on his team came forward claiming that Barry sexually abused him. The allegation, thank God, led to his arrest in Jacksonville, Florida, where he was charged on 6 counts of sexual battery and lewd and lascivious behavior.
It's amazing that it actually led to his
in the
arrest.
90s?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is actually amazing. He pled guilty to these charges and was sentenced to 4 years in prison, but he did not serve the full term of his sentence in the United States, but was arrested again in 1996 upon his return to England on additional charges for indecent assault, buggery, and attempted buggery, beginning as far back as his early career days in the 1970s.
Buggery.
All against young boys aged 9 to 15 years old.
Is buggery just...
We covered this
Is
in...
buggery like
lascivious behavior.
Sodomy
I feel
without
like...
consent?
Got it. I'm Googling.
I'm guessing.
Buggery. Anal sexual intercourse.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's, yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And which we kind of covered that, I feel like, in the Puritan crimes episode.
Right.
Maybe. But yeah,
I think it's like a British term for like criminal sodomy.
Yeah, yeah.
Like criminal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or not?
Yeah, no, that's accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
So by the time this trial concluded in 1998, Barry was found guilty of 23 offenses against 6 boys and received 11 years in prison.
That's it? Jesus.
Well, he certainly had more victims, but the Crown Prosecution Service did not want to re-traumatize additional victims at that trial, so they were given the option not to participate. So he's in jail into the early aughts. And this trial sparks a full-scale investigation into UK youth football clubs and what policies the clubs had in place to protect children. And like,
I'm guessing are nil.
Yeah, long story short, jack shit.
Yeah.
The report sparked more media attention around this scandal, and in 2016, brave victims of Barry Bennell started coming forward to tell their stories. The first was Andy Woodward, former Crewe and Alexandra and Bury player. This is from The Guardian. He gave an interview. Quote, Woodward's ordeal began when he was playing for Stockport Boys, and Bennell invited him to train with one of his teams on Manchester City's pitches at Platt Lane. Bennell talent-spotted boys aged 9 to 14 around the Northwest and Midlands over 3 decades, and Woodward was talented enough to be directed toward Crewe's youth setup. So this guy is literally, his job
It's to go around and watch
And
9 to
recruit
14-year-old
Yeah.
adolescent boys.
little boys.
And then like have power over them by
Yep.
dangling the carrot of becoming a famous footballer.
Literally, yes.
Great.
Yep. Like, talk about the fucking most insidious. Like,
It's honestly like being like a model
Yes.
scout for
Yes.
for pre-pubescent
yes.
children.
Creeping around malls.
If you are a fucking predator,
Yeah.
you have,
Mm-hmm.
as this guy did for decades, free reign
Mm-hmm.
over your prey.
Mm-hmm.
It just sends fucking chills down my spine. I can't. So, poor Andy, who goes by Woody, which is such a sweet name.
No.
He said, I just wanted to play football. My mom and dad will say that I always had a football in my hands wherever I went.
You're
I
supposed
saw
to play with your feet, Woody.
Oh, yeah.
You're not supposed to hold it in your hands.
You know what?
I had to make it.
That's your first mistake.
I had to make a joke. This is the only possible opening.
Maybe he's just that
She's been waiting for it.
Maybe he's like the one person who's allowed to
goalie.
throw it into, like goalie, and then there's someone who can like toss it out of the pitch, I guess.
Hashtag queen of sports.
Yeah, whatever, sports. Okay. So I saw Crew as the start of that dream, but I was soft-natured too, and it was the softer, weaker boys that Bennell targeted, end quote.
Yeah, because he's a predator.
Yep. Bennell arranged for him to stay at his house on the edge of the Peak District. Quote, it was like a treasure trove, a child's dream, Woodward says. When you walked through the door, there were 3 fruit machines. He had a pool table. There was a little monkey upstairs in a cage who would sit on your shoulder.
Oh my God, he's like Michael Jackson.
Yep.
Yeah.
He had 2 Pyrenean mountain dogs. He even kept a wild cat. It was my dream, remember, to be a footballer. And it was like he was dropping little sweets towards me.
Ew.
You can stay with me, and this is what I can do for you. Mm-hmm. Plus, he had a reputation as the best youth coach in the country. So I'd stay at weekends and summer holidays and even take time out of school sometimes. I'd go to all of the Crew matches with him. He liked dark-haired boys. I was a kid. I trusted him to begin with.
Yeah.
When the abuse started, Bennell used threats and blackmail to make sure his victims did not go against him. Quote, what he'd do sometimes to show the fear factor and make sure I never told anyone was get out some nunchucks, Woodward says.
God.
He was a master with them. He'd tell me to hold out a piece of paper. I'd be physically shaking. Then he'd hit it with enough force to split it in half and make a little comment. You see what I can do? You see how powerful I am?
What an absolute lunatic.
Absolute fucking lunatic
psychopath.
piece of shit. Yeah.
But like that would work against a 9-year-old boy who's
Absolutely.
already terrified
Absolutely.
and traumatized.
Yep.
And
Oh
just
my
like
God.
transfixed by this, the power
Yep.
right, that he has.
Little
Yep.
boys and nunchucks.
Mm-hmm. And Woody says, quote, it was either threats of violence or he'd use football to manipulate control. If I upset him in any way, he'd drop me from the team. At any point, he'd tell me, you will go, you will disappear, and that dream won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
It was emotional blackmail all the time, end quote. Now, buckle up for this next part, y'all, because I can't. The audacity of this motherfucker. Quote, when Woodward was 14, Bennell started having a relationship with his victim's 16-year-old sister. And this guy would have been in his late 20s at the time.
Ew.
Were the parents aware of that relationship?
Eventually they did. They were, because here's where it gets even worse. Quote, he was so much older he didn't want people to know at first and told me I would never play football again if I breathed a word of it, Woodward says. I was frightened to death because he had complete power over me by that stage. It was like a double whammy, and he would try to abuse me sometimes, even with my sister in the same house. Later, when their relationship became public, he would come around for Sunday dinner every weekend, sitting with my mom and dad and family, laughing and joking.
You're just never safe.
I was so frightened of him, I just had to suffer in silence. Then they got married
No. Was she still 16?
when she was 18. Or she was maybe a little bit older, because at this point, Woody was 18 when they got married. So the wedding took place in 1991, and Woodward, at 18, had to go through the hellish ordeal of seeing the man who had exploited, controlled, and abused him for years become his brother-in-law.
Ew.
Oh
Fucking
my
ew.
God.
Is that not... my jaw was on the fucking floor when I was reading this article. I was like,
So
I couldn't believe it.
is Bennell bisexual, or he's just like fucking with his prey?
You know what? I'm really not certain how he identifies in terms of his sexuality. From what I understand,
Like, is it a cover?
Abuse is abuse. I
Yeah,
feel like it
I'm
almost
really
doesn't
not
have anything
sure.
to do with like sexual attraction
Well,
in a lot
I
of
know.
cases.
I'm not really
There's-
sure.
I'm not linking the two
No,
at
no.
all, but I'm just,
It
I'm
is
wondering
curious.
if he is sexually attracted to the sister or if he is exclusively sexually attracted to little boys, but this
Mhm.
was like a good cover and a good like way in to always keep this kid under his thumb.
Frankly, I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think it's very possible and probable that he is bisexual. and that he was sexually attracted to the sister. He is clearly attracted to
She's young, yeah.
She was 16 when they started their relationship.
And he's a full-on adult.
And he is an adult in his late 20s, like early 30s at this point. But there's almost like the added sexual gratification and enticement of this being his victim sister. I just think it's so many layers.
Right, the power.
Of depravity, yeah.
Like, he's in on the power dynamic.
Yeah, he's part of the family now. He's literally fucking part of the family. Literally fucking part of the family.
And
it's
that
so
might
fucked
be
up.
the main motivator.
Exactly.
We don't know.
Mm-hmm. They obviously eventually got divorced, but it's just like, it's so fucked up.
So
Woody says, quote, I had to live with that on top of everything else. I had to attend that wedding standing in the church when I really wanted to rip his throat out. It was torture. That's the only word to describe it.
That makes me physically ill.
I know. Another victim is Anthony Hughes, a former youth player with Crew Alexandra, who was coached by Barry as well. Quote, he tells his sickening story as Crew Alexandra tonight launched an independent review of how the club has dealt with historical child abuse allegations. It emerged that the League Two club was once warned Bennell had sexually abused a junior footballer, but allowed him to stay on the condition that the kids were banned from going to his house.
Oh, so we know he's a pedophile, and we're going to let him keep working with kids.
They just can't go to his house.
But just not
Why
after hours.
weren't they banned from his house in the first place?
Because basically what this guy would do, and he had like a whole layer set up, like what he said, he set up his whole house to be like,
it's like any other
kid-friendly.
youth coaching. It's, you know,
He
that
had
you have to
rooms,
travel
the Michael
for
Ja-
meets.
He had
Michael
rooms
Jackson.
with bunk beds in them.
Yep.
And then the boys, like the night before a big match, would stay at his house. There would be a bus that would come and pick them all up from
The
the
parents
coach's
can't
location.
afford to take the time and travel to take them to all these fucking...
Yeah, so he would just take them the night before so the bus could just pick them up at one spot, and then everything else, he just could do with them what he wanted.
I am never letting other adults around my child.
You know what? That's for the best.
No.
So I'm going to read an interview with Anthony so that, once again, his story can be told in his own words. Quote, Anthony, now running a window cleaning business, says, and Anthony came forward, and we'll kind of get to it, because Woody had come forward. And he was like, Woody was so brave that, you know, and they're in their 40s
it helped
at this
empower
point.
me. Yeah.
Exactly. They've been holding this for decades. And even though this guy was finally behind bars, more and more of these stories are coming out, and he's like, I don't ever want this fucker to get out. I'm going to come forward too.
Right.
So says they would have a training session on Saturdays before spending the night at Bennell's house, complete with 4 bunk beds for the boys ahead of a match on Sundays. A minibus would pick us up and take 11 or 12 of us to his place, says Anthony. There was plenty of things for us to play with, pinball, a jukebox, computer games. Then he'd put a video on of us playing football, and we'd analyze that video.
So he'd break us down mentally, make us feel shame.
Yep. But once that finished, that's when he'd put on pornography, S&M type stuff. He had a great big stack of tapes in his house. He'd get us all sitting around watching it while he sat there stroking the back of your neck or putting his arms around your shoulder and stroking your chest and nipples.
Oh my God.
Or he'd give you a little tickle, and we'll kind of get to the tickling.
Oh my God.
It's clearly not the sort of thing that you should be doing with young kids. He gave us all that stuff to play with so he could groom us, end quote.
It's just classic grooming. And even if it ended here, that's still
it's still
abuse.
fucked up. Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Anthony believes he and his teammates were too young to understand that what Bennell was doing to them in his home was wrong. Quote, we didn't realize how bad it was, but looking back on it now, it's just a total shock, he says. Now I think, what the fuck was happening? His house was a dive. We'd get bowls of cereal to eat, and he had a great big St. Bernard dog, and he used to make us all clean up the shit. At bedtime, Bennell would take things to an even more sinister level. Anthony says Woody, so Andy Woodward, was invited into his room. I never did that. I've not spoken to Woody for over 20 years, but I've got so much respect for him doing this, meaning coming forward and speaking out. As adults, we now understand what was going on and was just so terribly wrong. I cannot praise Woody enough for his bravery in speaking out. I've not been in touch with any of the lads for years now, but I'd like to see them and speak to them again, end quote.
Oh, God.
Another victim, David Lean, believes he may have been one of Barry's first victims. He was coached by Barry in 1979. David was just 12 years old. He says, quote, the coaching sessions were fantastic. He was a brilliant coach with a winning personality. Everyone loved him. It's that whole like the abuser out in public is going to be everybody's favorite. So that when you hear this shit, they're
People
like, oh,
don't
there's
believe
no
it.
way. Yeah, he's so great. There's no way he would do that.
The church guy or the community
The skills he
leader.
could perform were way ahead of his time, including keeping the ball up in the air on just his shoulders and head. He instantly took a real shine to me and started to praise me at every opportunity, calling me a little star and telling me and my dad that he had links to Manchester City, ran a feeder team for the club, and that he wanted me to go and play games for his team during the forthcoming season.
Which is also very manipulative to the parents because the parents want every possible opportunity for their child.
It's so fucking predatory.
It's
so
also
this,
ticking every fucking box.
Oh, yeah.
my
it absolutely is.
Yeah, could not be more fucking classic.
Yeah.
So the youth club that he was in at the time ran a Boy of the Week competition. And although I did not win it on that occasion, in my mind, I had won the biggest prize. I had exchanged addresses with my new hero, and he wanted me to play for his team the next season. I was so desperate to win Boy of the Week, I somehow managed to persuade my parents to take the family to Plelly. I have no idea what this area is. To a place.
It looks Welsh.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
a crazy word.
It is a crazy word. For a second holiday in
place
September
called
that year. So he convinced his parents to take him on a trip to like where this guy was
I have to
also.
Google where this
yeah,
is.
please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Where this guy
it is
was
Welsh.
Welsh. Nailed it. How do you pronounce it? Flelly? Flelly?
How pronunciation?
Flele? Flele?
Okay, hold on.
It's an emotion.
Hold on. How do I play? Pathelli.
Okay, Valley.
Pathelli.
So he convinced his
Gesundheit.
parents. Bless you. He convinced his parents to take him on like a second trip holiday to where this Bennell guy Barry was like hosting.
Because he was desperate to be
Some
boy of the
soccer
week.
shit. Yeah, exactly. So this time the praise and attention were far greater, and I did win Boy of the Week. I was on cloud 9. I won a huge trophy. Got my first ever photograph in the paper and won a free holiday too. So there's a picture of him on the drive with his Boy of the Week, and he's posing with Barry Bennell. Bennell had given me a couple of football shirts and had been writing to me for almost 4 months.
He's so
and
sweet.
I know, such a little peanut.
His little, it's like not, it's like a 70s version of a bowl cut.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
And his collar is enormous.
Well, it was the 70s.
I love it.
Oh.
Yeah. David says, by this point, I worshipped him. Due to my own football commitments in Lytham St. Anne's, playing for my local team, my school and Blackpool school boys, as well as rep teams, I never ended up playing for his feeder team. In early 1980, he wrote to me inviting me to go and take part in a soccer skills course at Macclesfield, which was scheduled to take place on a Friday. The plan was to travel on Thursday evening to his property and stay until Saturday morning, which would mean spending 2 nights with him. I was buzzing. I could not get there fast enough and was really looking forward to it. 2 nights at my hero's house playing football. What more could I want? However, things soon changed. From the time I arrived, he never left me alone. He focused all his attention on me, play fighting, touching me, massaging me, and sort of cuddling up on the couch.
The fact that Bennell kept track of this kid, knew that he was eager, knew that he was like ripe
For
the
several years.
plucking. Yeah, tracked him, and
He
then
met him in 79 and
got-
didn't get to make his move until over like a year later.
such a fucking
It's so
predator.
gross.
I know. It's really deeply
Like he must
fucking
have
disturbing.
had like a Rolodex.
Oh, you know he fucking did. And newspaper clippings, and you know he just had all that shit.
Ugh.
I fucking hate it.
And knew the parents and
Yep.
ugh.
Yep. So when I got into bed that night, Bennell left the room and then re-entered and got into bed with me without asking. After a long period of tickling and playing mirroring games, he sexually abused me in bed for a prolonged period. The following day after football, I returned with him to his property and the abuse happened again. Each morning following the abuse, he acted completely normal and was back to his passionate and enthusiastic
Yeah,
self.
gaslighting.
I was all alone, lost, scared, and confused, miles from home. Once back home, I began spending time on my own in my bedroom. I had no idea what had happened, and due to the way my own body had reacted at the time of my abuse, I thought perhaps I was gay. I was embarrassed and kept it to myself for many years after. I knew I was never going back there and had just begun to feel safe again in that knowledge. However, just a few weeks later, I arrived home from school. Oh God, this just makes me feel sick. I arrived home from school to find him sitting in my front room talking to my mom.
God, he knew exactly. He had such a pattern. He knew exactly what he was doing.
Yep.
It's so gross.
Yep. He had never been to my house before. For many months afterwards, I was terrified to come home from school. For several years, I began knocking around with younger boys as boys my own age started to get girlfriends, and I was confused. Like, he was sexually confused, so he's just hanging out with younger boys in his age group. I felt safer and less confused with younger boys as they were still obsessed with football and not so much into girls. I finally told Macclesfield police what had happened to me on the 4th of February, 2013. So years, he's an adult at that point.
Years later, decades later.
Yep, which was very hard. I then had a long battle with the CPS. I don't think that's Child Protective Services, but it's like a police force in the UK. They initially dropped my case as it was, quote, not in the public interest
Oh, dear God.
to pursue. I told both police and CPS that at that time that there would be hundreds of victims of Bennell and asked them to open an investigation, but they still dropped my case, end quote.
The CPS in the UK is the Crown Prosecution Service.
Service, that's right. Okay.
So basically, they were just like, look, he's already behind bars.
This is years later. Yeah.
It
sounds like
decades later.
it sounds like
we don't
the
want to
FBI.
fucking deal with you.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So while young boys were staying the night in Bennell's home, he would initiate play fights with his victims, tickle and flick them with tea towels before sexually abusing them in his bed. He had a fetish for tickling the boys until they wet themselves. So he would literally tickle them until they peed their pants because they like that's fucking torture.
That's torture. And it would be humiliating for the victims.
Yep.
And there's like a weird thing where like victims of sexual abuse can start bedwetting. So like it's all wrapped up.
Weirdly connected. Yeah.
Ugh.
So I didn't cover tickling as a form of torture because I knew you'd be talking about it. But just since you brought it up, I just want to explain what psychologically tickling is. So this is, while laughter is popularly thought of as a pleasure response in tickle torture, the one being tickled may laugh whether or not they find the experience pleasant. In a tickling sensation, laughter can indicate a panic reflex rather than a pleasure response. Tickle torture may be a consensual activity or one that is forced depending on the circumstances, obviously. Forced tickle torture can cause real physical and mental distress in a victim, which is why it has been used as an interrogation method or simply to show dominance over another person.
There you go. So in the context of sexual assault,
is also like you can't breathe.
Yep.
It's not fun.
It's not fun.
I fucking hate
and
being
it's
tickled.
one of the earliest ways that we can teach children about consent.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, you need to teach your child that when they say no, that's
Yep.
going to be respected.
Yep.
And so if you're tickling and playing around and they say no, you have to stop.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah.
that is like the first way to instill that idea of consent. And then they know going forward that if another adult or child, someone else isn't listening to their
Any kind of touch.
consent, then that's wrong. And they know that there's that line and that's wrong.
And even if that adult or that authority person,
Older child,
or
anyone.
thinks that it's fun and you don't,
Yeah.
Right.
you're allowed to say no.
It's not
Absolutely.
okay. And so, tickling when somebody...
Tickling's really fucked up.
It's really fucked up.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So one victim who chose to remain anonymous testified in court, quote, that the former Crew Alexander coach would play a game of follow me. He would move his hands around your body on the outside of your clothes, tickle you, and you would have to do the same back to him.
So the mirroring thing.
That's the mirroring. Okay.
He said the game would continue until his hands were inside your shirt or inside your underpants. He added, I just thought it was normal. This is what you have to do. The court heard how none of the boys who have alleged they were abused would speak to each other about their experience because this guy had fucking freaked them out so much about it. The boys also could not tell anyone else about what was happening out of fear that they would not be believed or they would jeopardize their chances of becoming professional footballers. When more and more victims started coming forward in 2016, Barry had already been released for his previous offenses, and now he would be brought up on charges again for even more victims that had previously been unknown.
That's
and we may
good.
never know exactly how many boys he abused. Some speculate it's likely in the hundreds.
Oh my God.
Barry was convicted of 60 counts and sentenced to 31 years of in prison in this like final round of.
Okay, so he
of
served 4,
allegations.
then 11, and then
now he's in
sentenced to
prison.
31.
Yeah, and he's in his late 60s. He's gonna die in prison. Like it's over for him.
One can hope.
Yeah, thank God. Following this fresh conviction, calls for accountability from Barry's colleagues and superiors continued to get louder. The spotlight turned to a man named Dario Grotti, who was the manager of Crew Alexandra, which is where like he spent the majority of his career and where most of the abuse took place. Mm-hmm. This Grotti guy recruited Barry from Manchester City because of his excellent credentials and admitted to not looking into Barry's background because they wanted him on their coaching staff so badly.
Cool.
Okay.
Yep.
Because winning a fucking game is more important than protecting the children in your care.
Well, this Dario guy is also a piece of shit, and he was thoroughly investigated as well for inappropriate conduct, but there is no evidence that he crossed that line. However, he did admit to encouraging, quote, a close player and coach culture. And I think it was possible that some of the boys like stayed over at his house too on like football trips or before trips, but nobody came forward with any allegations against him. And considering how many now men are coming forward against Barry, you'd think that if Dario had also
Engaged
sexually
in this.
assaulted them, like why not?
But it's also possible he knew or he got whiffs.
And he did.
of-
He did.
Yeah.
So he was aware of allegations against Barry, and this is gonna fucking I can't with this. He was aware of allegations against Barry while working together, and Grotti, quote, did not consider a person putting their hands down another's trousers to be an assault.
It is if one's a child.
Yeah. Or like just in general
Not
without
consenting.
consent. Yeah. So this is a final quote from The Guardian. Quote, overnight stays by boys were normalized at Crew in a way which they were not elsewhere, with some boys staying at Grotti's house. The report added that there was no evidence Grotti acted inappropriately with boys on any of those visits or in any of his other interactions with them. Football clubs that Barry had worked for made predictable statements of, we didn't know, and we're putting policies in place to keep this from happening again, to which, like, I can't fucking help but roll my eyes. Obviously, all these football clubs are just trying to cover their asses.
Right.
And many of them still exist. Obviously, he's not working there, but it's like, these are like well-known youth football clubs that kind of feed like a
Youth
pipeline into the
sportsman.
professional. Yeah. It's
Obviously they don't all employ predatory coaches,
course
but
not.
if you're
But
not
predators will seek out
if you're not
opportunity.
protecting the youth against it, it's gonna happen.
Yeah, because as Kenyon said, this guy, he played football as a youth himself. He already had an interest and a talent for football. He could have coached adult football clubs, and he chose not to because he wanted to surround
He
himself
wanted
with
a pool of victims.
correct.
Oh, it's so gross.
It's so fucked up, and it just the tickling these boys until they wet themselves. I just like. It's so fucking tragic and heartbreaking. And the hundreds of lives that this man fucked up. And these poor kids that until they were in their 40s felt like they couldn't say anything about their experience. Like, I don't know. The whole thing is just so fucking heartbreaking.
I don't care who the person is.
Mm-hmm.
If an adult having children over at their house that, like, we're not talking about like a sleepover, which obviously you have to be careful there too.
Right.
But like in this, I don't know. I just don't understand. And I'm not trying to like blame the parents because they're also victims in this. But you can't let your kids sleep over at adults' houses where the adults have power over your kid.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't care
mean,
how nice the guy seems.
I agree. I am giving this a yes and because like I did plays and tons of like choir trips and all kinds of shit like that where like sometimes you would be at like a chaperone's home or at like a hotel, you know, being monitored by adults. Like
Sure.
you want your kids to have
experiences out in the world.
experiences and like extracurriculars. It's just you just have to use so much discernment and like really be aware of what's going on. And there are still going to be a lot of situations where you don't know what you don't know. And
I feel like there just have to be policies in place where like parent chaperones are always also there. The parent chaperones rotate.
Right.
So it's
exactly.
not always the same.
So the
you know,
coach
like,
just doesn't have a bunch of kids in their basement.
yes.
Yeah, no,
Or
I
like
completely
the
agree.
Michael Jackson situation. Like it's just not okay. Like what do you fucking think is going on?
I mean, I have conflicting feelings about the Michael Jackson situation. I actually don't. I think that he had such like a broken inner child that yes, he did act inappropriately with other children, but I actually don't think he like sexually abused people.
I think
I don't like Michael Jackson.
I don't know. I feel like
him.
whatever he did has already crossed the line. Just like we said with this Bennell guy, like lots of his victims, maybe he didn't actually like sexually penetrate them, but he made them watch porn and tickled them.
And like we said
that's
before,
abuse.
you can get so close to breaking the law that it's bad, but until you break the law, you haven't broken the law.
Right. Yeah, it's
and that we can prove. So
no,
I don't
of
know.
course.
I'm not a Michael Jackson fan at all.
No.
I mean, I'm not like a Michael Jackson
You're speculating
fan, but
about
I'm not 100%
Yeah,
convinced that everything that's out there about everyone is necessarily 100% accurate, but what we do know that this guy is a fucking piece of shit and ruined a lot of fucking people's lives, and now he's going to die in prison.
Good.
So fuck you, Barry Bennell, and your goddamn tickling.
Well, that is not where I thought the tickle torture was going to go, if I'm going to be honest. Because there's like, the Dollop did an episode and there's like some documentary about.
Oh yeah, I didn't want to cover those because they're like so popular,
so famous. Yeah, but I thought that is where you were going, and this was way worse.
Yeah. No, I wanted to really ruin everything for everyone.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah,
And,
you're welcome, honey.
Thank you to our fan picker Endelian Hopkins.
This is your fault.
And Dandelion.
And
Dandelion Hopkins. Thank you so much. This was an interesting episode.
It's all your fault that we suck. Yes, it's all your fault that we suck.
All right. Love you. See you next week.
Bye-bye.